Welcome back to the ADHD Goals podcast. It feels good to say that again. You may have noticed that it's been a little while since the last episode, and that is because I have been a busy boy. I have been building some tools for you guys and writing a book, which will be available very soon. So just to briefly explain what those are, we've finally got the ADHD Canvas, which is available for you guys to use. We've also got the ADHD Entrepreneur Business Automation Blueprint. So if you are running your own business and feeling like you are the bottleneck and you want to reduce that overwhelm, then you will want to go and check that out. Those are available on the website, which is adhdcanvas.io. And you can also sign up for the waitlist to get updates on when the book will be available. But more on that at the end of the show, so stick around for that. But I have a fantastic guest for you today to kick off this new series of episodes. Her name is Kat Frize, and she is the COO of Care ADHD, which is one of the UK's fastest growing ADHD assessment and treatment providers. In this conversation, Kat takes us back to the beginning, where she was growing up as a high achiever who never quite fit the picture of what ADHD was supposed to look like, and she takes us through hitting the wall at university when the structure of school had quietly been holding her together suddenly disappeared, and then eventually reaching that epiphany moment as a mother when she started to see her own brain reflecting back at her through her daughter. We also talk about what Care ADHD is, why it was built, and what it means to design healthcare services that actually works for the people that need it most. And we spend a lot of time discussing what it's like for the experience of mothers who receive an ADHD diagnosis at the same time as their child is getting diagnosed with ADHD. So why this happens so often, and why actually that diagnosis can be the thing that changes everything, not just for you, but for the whole family. So without further ado, let's get into the conversation. So, Kat, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me, Lawrence. It's really nice to chat with you today.
Oh, yeah, it's a pleasure. I've been looking forward to chatting with you because I've been noticing that Care ADHD has been doing a really big push at the moment to grow that team there. So it'd be exciting to talk about what's going on over there. Are you in Canary Wharf today?
I am, yes. I've had a bit of annual leave recently, so I'm in the office pretty much every day this week, catching up with people and moving projects along. I do like coming down here, but I'm hybrid, so sometimes I'm at home.
Ah, okay. Well, hybrid, we might get onto that later, the hybrid working and how that
Yeah.
affects ADHD. But I could go into so many different subtopics. It's all
Lawrence, we're going to have a lot of fun. I can feel the rabbit holes coming.
Exactly. Watch out. So I tend to like to start the show with finding out a little bit about the guest. And so I want to find out a little bit about your own backstory and your own experience with ADHD.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a bit of a funny one for me because I think, like a lot of women my age who have been diagnosed later in life, it really became apparent for me that there might be something more to my traits when I became a mum.
Mm-hmm.
And it was only when I started to, I don't know, understand, I guess, a little bit more about some of the communication challenges that I was having with my own daughter and wondering why can my husband seemingly have these amazing exchanges with her that are nice and calm, and they just communicated really well, and I was really struggling. And I started to really reflect on it and think about things a little bit more deeply. And that kind of took me into a lot of different rabbit holes. And it was only then that I started to recognize some of the, I don't know, the challenges, I guess, that I was seeing in her were actually coming from me. And she hadn't got them from dad at all. They were very much from me. And that was when I had this kind of almost like an epiphany moment where I thought, actually, you know what? I don't think that a lot of people or neurotypical people do think the way that I think and have the, I don't know, challenges that I'm experiencing. And maybe that's something that I should start to explore. And yeah, and it was a bit of a kind of rabbit hole that I went down, which eventually ended up in me receiving a diagnosis in my late 30s. And it was almost like when I found out that I had ADHD and I understood more about what it was almost a kind of, there was that moment of like, how could I not have known before this?
Hmm.
Because it's so obvious when you actually write it all down and you actually look at all the signs. But of course, we didn't know back then what we know now. So
Yeah, I was going to ask because it's all well and good it becoming clear now. I don't think we had the same lens 20 years ago to understand the frame of reference of what ADHD was. I mean, in my mind, ADHD, as I heard it when I was a child, it was only ever really referenced on like American boys, naughty boys in films or whatever. And so to think that ADHD could be something else that didn't show outwardly and it wasn't just fidgeting or being naughty was somewhat of a revelation for me as well, because I didn't tend to be that kind of a child. It was just all that internal fidgeting.
yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because I was a really high achiever at school. You know,
Hmm.
I was put over there in the, I think they called it at the time, they probably don't call it this anymore, the gifted enabled students, I don't know, club or whatever. And you were basically left over there because you functioned and you got on with the work and you weren't being super disruptive or needing a lot of extra help.
Hmm.
And as I got older, I did become more disruptive, but I think because I was doing well academically, it wasn't a cause for concern. It was a Kat needs to stop talking so much. If only Kat stopped talking, then she would be able to achieve so much more. And she's
Mm.
distracting her friends. It wasn't a she's not hitting the markers and she's going to fail her exams kind of disruption. And so it was just deprioritized because there were bigger challenges in the classroom than me at that time. But that in itself caused me issues because then I felt like I got to my late teens. Then when I went into university and I had to be really self-sufficient, I lost a lot of those structures that were in place for me in that very led, taught environment at school. And suddenly it was like, oh, wow, this is not good. And yeah, I struggled. I really struggled. And the fear of failure for me was acute. And it really, it prevented me actually from doing an awful lot of things back then that I really wanted to do and I could have done.
Hmm.
But I had never been put in a position before where I wasn't going to succeed. And
Hmm.
so being at university, losing that structure that had kept me functional as a young person going through school, albeit with the other challenges, it was a real shock to the system.
No, I resonate with that totally. That whole, once you strip away the structure and you've got to start looking after yourselves, you realize that, oh, wow, I've got no discipline whatsoever. Or,
Oh, and then Lawrence, when you throw a couple of kids into that, wow, that was really when it hit me, actually,
hmm.
really. And that's, I think, why I don't want to describe it as going downhill, but it was a struggle. It was a real struggle
Hmm.
looking after the other people that I was now responsible for at that time.
Mm. And you mentioned earlier that it was communication issues. And I wonder if you could describe those in a bit more detail.
Oh, absolutely. I find this subject really fascinating, actually. So, my daughter has been diagnosed with ADHD and autism, and she has Tourette's as well. So, lots of comorbidities that we see quite commonly in people who are neurodivergent. And the thing with ADHD and autism is they, as I'm sure they really are headbutting each other in many of those traits that you find with those conditions. And she is, for example, someone who is a very literal thinker. So she needs very precise language. She needs it to be factual. If we're in the car and she says to me, "Where are we going?" and I say, "It's just round the corner," and we literally do not turn the next corner, that's a problem. And we
Yeah.
would end up getting into a tussle in the car. Like,
Yeah.
she would be saying, "But mummy, you lied to me." And I would be, "No, just calm down. It's fine." And it was those kind of conversations that I actually found really difficult because my brain is working at 500 miles an hour. I just want to get to the point of the conversation or to the place that we're going and achieve this objective that I am so focused on getting to. And her way of communicating was she needs me to be really precise in the way that I communicate with her. And if I am going too quickly for her, that overwhelms her. And then you've got this snowballing effect where her overwhelm is preventing me from moving as quickly as I need to move because I have to stop, pause, be a mum, manage this situation, this conversation. And before I knew what that was and why it was happening, it was really stressful because I thought that she was being difficult and I thought that I was being a bad mum. And why can my husband have these interactions with her and this not happen? It doesn't escalate this way. And actually, it'd been this way since she was a toddler, and it had always been that way with me and her. And I didn't necessarily have that challenge with my son.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly, my son's traits, though he's not diagnosed, he has very similar traits to me. And my daughter has very similar traits to my husband. And so they communicate in a way that is different to the way that I communicate. And that's actually why eventually I did go down the path of seeking an assessment for her, because I needed to understand why we were struggling, why I was struggling to communicate with her in the way that she needed me to, and whether this was just her being difficult with me because of maybe my downfall as a parent and my inabilities to communicate effectively with her, or if there was just something in the way that she needed to communicate that I wasn't aware of and wasn't accommodating. And actually, that's what it was. She
Yeah.
needed to understand what she needed.
I think that's quite an interesting play of, I would probably say, well, I'm jumping to conclusions, but the precision of needing to know everything, I would probably put that in the autistic camp as opposed to the ADHD camp. And personally, when I think about my parenting, me and my children, I've got one of my daughters is I would say, very ADHD. And so whenever we've got to get anywhere on time, whether it's getting to school or whatever, I'm so focused on trying to get myself ready and on time that I'm not able to then do all the sort of really organized stuff to help her get ready on time. So there's always a clash when it comes to that. But to imagine the situation where if I was needing to think ahead and have all the details ready to reassure a child, I'd be like, I'm just winging it. So I don't have those details. So I'll give you precise.
And that's exactly what I've had to do. I've had to be really open with the kids, and we do have a very open relationship, and we talk really frankly about the way that our brains work. And it was something that I've been quite proactive in wanting to educate them on so that we can understand each other better. And even if I don't have all the answers, to be able to say to them, I don't have the answers right now, but let's go and find out. Let's understand how we can navigate this situation better together. It is very important because she does need things from me that I can't always give to her. Precise timings. I've maybe not taken my meds and I'm at the weekend, I'm not in functional work mode. I'm in, okay, I'm going to relax. I'm going to have some downtime mode. And she needs to know, what time are we going to arrive at the birthday party and who is going to be there? And I haven't cognitively switched on that part of my head yet. That can be a real challenge. And then I'm struggling with my own time blindness, and I'm getting held to account because I said that we'd be leaving at 12:07 and it's now 12:09 and mummy, we haven't left yet. And it's stressful.
Yeah.
Actually being armed with the knowledge to navigate those situations and knowing that's what she needs. And if I don't have it right, then I can call it out and say, hey, my daughter, I'm not going to say her name. Hey, daughter, you need this right now, and mummy can only give you that. And that's why we're having a difficult moment. Let's just take a second. I'll do my best to get you what you need, but I might not be able to do that right now. Having those conversations have really helped us.
Yeah. So take me back to that time where you were getting your daughter a diagnosis, and then it turned out that you thought, oh, I think maybe I need to get a diagnosis as well. I mean, those two things happening at the same time, and also, I suppose, given that back when you were a child, you didn't perhaps weren't aware of ADHD as much. What was it like, first of all, getting your child's diagnosis and then realizing you were ADHD? How did it all unfold, and how did you take those first steps into?
Yeah, it's a good question. It was very much in parallel. It started with this sort of realization at one point that her traits that I was struggling with, and this is on the sort of more of the ADHD side as well, because she's hyperactive ADHD, I'm combined. They were probably coming from me. Some of her kind of emotional dysregulation, that kind of side of her. Sorry, I've just realized my notifications are going to start popping off. I'm just going to put that on focus mode so that they don't keep pinging me. I had this moment where it occurred to me that I shared those traits, and I actually went to get my diagnosis first.
Mhm.
So I hadn't really decided at that point whether I was definitely going to take her through that pathway. She expressed a desire to have an assessment because she was struggling with her tics, which at the time we did not know was Tourette's.
Mm.
And so when I was looking into it, I decided that we needed to go down a kind of holistic route and really have a full assessment in one go to look at all of the challenges that we were having, really, because it occurred to me that I probably was the cause of some of these. So in parallel of kind of realizing that we needed to go down this pathway with her, I am in a fortunate position where I was able to go and get a private assessment.
Mhm.
And I'd gone to the doctor to talk about her and her needs, and they had actually referred us to the neurological centre for her tics and for further assessment via the NHS.
Mhm.
In the meantime, I went privately, got my assessment, realized, yeah, I do think actually she definitely needs this holistic kind of review. And then the NHS, after a little while, came back to us and said, no, she's eating, drinking. We're not concerned that she might have a tumour or anything like that.
Mhm.
Therefore, we're not going to see her in this hospital. You can go to the CAMS community team. So they then sent us in that direction, at which point the doctor told me it was going to be a number of years before we were going to see anyone. So I decided, by the need to better understand the communication needs between us and her desire to look into the tics and understand that better, to go privately. So I found a great local doctor who we were able to go and see after a lot of assessing of the market, actually, because there's an awful lot of options out there. We weren't seeking medication or anything at that time if she came out with a diagnosis. I just wanted to understand what was going on so that we could
Mhm.
be armed with that knowledge. So I got my diagnosis. Then a little while later, she got her diagnosis. And here we are.
Yeah. So if I understand that correctly, when you first were looking for her to be assessed, you mentioned like a holistic assessment. So it was it not necessarily ADHD or autism, the tics? You just wanted to see what they suggested before you went down a more specific route. Is that?
Not quite. It was just that it was holistic in the sense that we saw the same clinicians
I
for
see.
both of those conditions. And I chose a psychiatrist who could actually look at the tics as well, the tic disorder, to tell us whether that was a tic disorder, whether it was something else, whether it was Tourette's. So what I didn't want, because of course you can go and take your child for an ADHD assessment and then be
Yeah.
told, well, we think this might be autism or something else or anxiety or whatever. I went in arming the doctor with the information that I thought it was potentially this and this, and we would like to be assessed for both. But I also want you to look at the tics that we're living with as well. And I think because I'd gone in for that with that kind of holistic approach, it meant that we weren't going to lots of different doctors. We were getting that really holistic view, because otherwise the risk is that you go in, you see one person, you may or may not come out with a diagnosis. They might point you somewhere else, as well as the kind of, I guess, the kind of clinical context for the person that you're sitting in front of. It's just not a great experience for the family and the child.
Mhm. And I think also as well, when you suspect that it might not just be ADHD, but it could be something else. And then, if well, going down the NHS route, it's a long time to wait. And then also, if you're going down the private route, it can be quite expensive as well to have those different things assessed at the same time. So it can be quite a daunting decision to make and go, oh, well, you have to know quite a bit about what you think it might be in order to get the right set of assessments. And I suppose if the parent is ADHD, that decision paralysis can be
Oh,
quite
it's
challenging.
yeah, it's definitely challenging.
I thought the ADHD assessment criteria was like a catch-22 test. It's like, well, if you can book the assessment, then you haven't got it because it's so complicated.
Yeah. It's wild. It really is. There's so much to it. And actually it's been so it's been really helpful for me in my role right now to have gone through these processes as both an adult woman going through the process, but also as a mother to see what those pathways look like across various providers, the NHS, and just understanding the diagnostic process itself, the assessment process, because we have a real opportunity to make it better for people.
Mm-hmm.
And while still keeping it clinically safe and robust and thorough and the highest possible quality standards, we should be looking at every single opportunity about how we can improve the overall experience and make it accessible. Because the very fact is that, I mean, the condition itself makes it hard enough to go through these processes, the pre-assessment forms and the waiting and everything. But there's such a high proportion of people who have ADHD who are also living with comorbidities, which they may or may not be aware
Mm-hmm.
of. Things are against us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think also, I mean, you mentioned, we spoke about the communication issues. And I think in the workplace, understanding everybody's potential different approaches to communication or how communication lands. It could be at home within the family, but it could be in the workplace. I think it's so important to be able to identify what those are for each person and have that understanding for yourself, but also as part of a team. It can really change things for people, I think.
I could not agree more. And actually, I feel like I've had an awful lot of growth throughout this period of my life, because not only do I have a better understanding of myself and how I work, how I best receive and deliver information, but also how to navigate those communication challenges with someone whose brain works differently to mine. But I've been able to carry that forward at work. And we do things like have README documents. So
Mm-hmm.
I have a guide to CAT, the CAT instruction manual. And I really like to, when people come on board, I really like to reassure them that I might come across as a bit blunt sometimes. It's not me being blunt. I'm just thinking about the next thing already, because there's a lot of other things that I need and want to get to. And I operate at 500 miles an hour. So I don't really have time for a lot of the kind of fluff that you might find cushions the message a little bit more. So being able to actually tell someone that and reassure them, particularly when, again, ADHD, people have rejection sensitivities, and proactively sharing that message can be the difference between coming to work and knowing where you stand and how best to communicate and work and enjoy your day, and actually going home at the end of the day anxious, second guessing that conversation that you had in the morning. And yeah, so it's been great.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me personally, that rejection sensitive dysphoria, it can be so paralyzing. I mean, you mentioned at the beginning in terms of like fear of failure, that was a big thing for you. That can debilitate me in terms of not being able to get something done because you're so worried about not doing it well enough or failing at it that you then don't do it.
Yeah. 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 And that really, particularly when I started university, that was a big problem. And I think one of the things that's helped me the most to actually get over that is being a parent and recognizing that I don't have I feel guilty if I don't go for things
Mm-hmm.
and I don't do the things, because I'm preaching to these beautiful young people that they need to go out there and they need to seize the day and they need to do what they want to do. And if I don't live that and model that, then I'm
Mm-hmm.
failing them. And that in
Yeah.
itself is a problem. So I that's really helped me. I do wonder sometimes if, had I not become a parent, I would still be struggling now to the level that I did when I was back at university with that.
Yeah, I think for me, becoming a parent it took me out of my world being just me and my perspective to having to open up and question whether I was doing things correctly and was I responsible for that going the way it went. And I think that change in perception really helped unlock a lot of things for me. So I wonder if you could take me from the period of the diagnosis and then moving through to where you are now and on this journey to working with Care ADHD and some of the things that changed for you, things that you put in place and why you were then drawn to what you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was diagnosed not long before I started here, maybe within a year or so in the lead up to joining. And I was already taking medication. And I think it was that experience actually of starting medication that, again, it was almost like this light bulb moment where suddenly you realize that, oh, people can have a quiet brain and I can in a way that I didn't know was possible that many other people probably operate in daily.
Hmm.
That I felt like it was an important time, I think, for that transition because I was transitioning in my life anyway. We'd actually been living overseas in Asia for the best part of 2 years, I think we'd been there and traveling around with the kids. We were world schooling. And that experience was fantastic. But I had been in my last role for a little while and it had become, it wasn't filling my cup as it perhaps, oh, my light's gone off because I'm in the office and it's not moving. Sorry, I'm going to just
That's okay.
wait.
I can
There we
see
go.
perfect. I should have said that.
That's okay.
It was just fun watching you.
Me just doing a little dance here.
The YMCA,
Yeah,
yeah.
so it wasn't really filling my cup as it once was, and I'd had various other kind of projects on the side and things that I'd been involved with over the years, as I always have, and I'm not one person who can do one thing very easily and feel satisfied.
Hmm.
So we just naturally came to this sort of inflection point, really, and an opportunity came up to support Care in the first instance with setting up some of the systems that they needed to be set up, and then actually to step into a role where initially my primary focus was on the customer experience and looking at that end-to-end journey, which was something that I had been involved with previously in a former role. I've always worked remotely and I've been remote for about 20 years, working in the digital sector with different
Hmm.
software companies and different service companies. And one of my past roles, I was in a kind of product position, operations and product. So it was really exciting to get back into that. And then that role evolved with the needs. And I eventually moved into the position of chief operating officer about 6 months later after working with the business for 6 months. And I think what's been really fulfilling about being here at this particular point is because I was here within about 6 months, 5, 6 months of Care starting to offer the service and actually going live with their operations. So I've been able to see it through a really important period of its development and growth. And with that, your impact is huge.
Hmm.
And we're dopamine seekers, right? So
Hmm.
when you can come in every single day and get that satisfaction of saying, yes, I've done this, and here's this immediate impact, is very rewarding. And then the added kind of reward of knowing that I'm supporting people like me and families like mine. And it gives it a real sense of purpose.
Yeah.
So I've been just absolutely loving it. And I'm a kind of healthcare convert now. I'm not sure
Mm.
that I'll ever leave.
No, I think you've hit on something really important in terms of that sense of purpose. I think for a lot of people with ADHD, it's probably due to a lot of time blindness and disorganization, but work can take over their lives. And I suppose it's nice if you can be paid well, but if it's going to take up so much of your time and your mental capacity and space, you might as well get that added bonus of feeling like you're actually doing something of purpose as well.
Yeah, and I do think that for us in particular, we've got such a great opportunity to have an impact in a way that there aren't many providers that have been able to do that yet. We've brought together this amazing expertise from the world of healthcare and the NHS, and we've married it up with this awesome team from the digital sector, and we're bringing those two worlds together to tackle a problem that's been difficult to tackle up to now.
So we're talking about Care ADHD now, and I wonder, just for the listeners, whether it might be worth if you give us a sort of a brief understanding of why Care ADHD exists and what makes you different.
Yeah, so Care ADHD was founded actually by our founding team. Mark Patterson is a psychiatric nurse. He's still registered, and he had previously been running ADHD services for the NHS. He was a service director in the NHS, and he was very frustrated by the challenges that prevented him from getting the patients the access to the services that they needed. And he felt that we could do better. And so he set out to create something that was able to support more people in a more streamlined way with a real focus on their experience and ultimately save the NHS money and support the NHS, because we can take a lot of the load that at the moment they're not necessarily best placed to be able to support. So it was an opportunity. And I think knowing people from the digital world and being able to see that there's a gap here and we could approach this from a slightly different angle and get the best out of both of those worlds to solve the problem in a different way.
So what were those frustrations that Mark was having in terms of the, I mean, from my experience, it takes a long time to get diagnosed through the NHS, but so was it simply that issue, the time it takes, or were there other issues that
I think the kind of landscape has evolved a lot since care was originally conceived and set up. But ultimately, I guess the roadblocks that are in place to actually be able to streamline things, to be able to make change, there's, the NHS is a wonderful organisation, but there are a lot of stage gates to things that make it difficult to make change. And we live in this world where actually, if we want to build something to improve things, we can just go and do that. There's nothing stopping us. And I haven't worked in the NHS, but from what I'm told, it's very difficult to just wake up in the morning and go, you know what, I think we can do better. Let's change it this way and this way. It has to go through 3 years of committees and sign-offs and approvals and funding applications and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's such a big machine. And my understanding is that it's very difficult to make change in a big machine like that. So to step outside of that and think creatively and think, how can we use technology, for example, to improve this experience? How can we introduce roles that are completely alien to the NHS? So we're a product-led organisation. We've got a product function. And the point of the product team is it's about looking at the outcomes that we want for our patients and making sure that our service and the software that we create to deliver that service gets patients and their families to that outcome that they are working towards in the most streamlined, comfortable, excellent way that we possibly can. And so we can design in a really bespoke, intentional way that the NHS would struggle to be able to do because, for example, they don't have those kind of functions there. And if they wanted to bring that kind of a team in to think about or design something in a slightly different way, they wouldn't necessarily have the resources. It's tough.
Yeah, and I think we touched on it earlier, like that customer experience, user experience, particularly in the diagnostic process. And I was saying I found it really difficult. It's that kind of thing when you're working with an organisation, as fantastic as the NHS is, it is unfortunately slow moving. And all those things that all those hoops that you have to go through, it's like that is big red tape admin nightmare that unfortunately, they have to do. But for the person with ADHD or whatever the neurodivergent condition is, some of these processes are really challenging and it's not designed for the customer or the user or the patient in mind. And I think, that's a fascinating.
As a sorry to
Yeah, no,
you,
I was
Lauren.
actually reaching for a word there, so you came in at the right.
That's one of my traits, and I'm very aware of it, so I apologize. I don't mean to interrupt you. But as an example, one of the things that slows them down, I think, is if you are to go and see a psychiatrist in the NHS to have an assessment, you might sit in front of that person for 4 hours doing a full diva interview. And we are able to put systems in place to allow us to gather certain information from patients beforehand in a really streamlined way, and
Mm,
then use technology to help us prep so that when we go into that appointment and we meet that patient, we don't need to take up a whole day like
mm,
perhaps the NHS would, because they don't have that the kind of systems in place to support it. We can really focus on the fact that we have this information from the patient already. So let's really get into these details. And it makes those interactions very meaningful because
mhm.
you've done all the prep work, you've done all that legwork that doesn't have to be done live. So, yeah, that's one of the ways that I think we're able to deliver in a slightly different way to the NHS.
Yeah. And I think that assessment process can also be quite, I mean, I don't know if this is a bugbear of mine, but it, you know, I think particularly with children, if they're getting assessed because they're having challenges at school, sometimes a lot of the classroom environment is what is triggering ADHD traits like, eh, shutting down one part of the brain because they're thinking about everybody else is going to know the answer to this. I'm not going to know the answer to this. They get scared and then they can't function. And I think when you go to have an assessment with somebody, you're in a completely different environment. And then you might come across as really focused and engaged, and none of those things appear. And so I think it can be quite challenging to feel like the assessment process does capture all of the information that you need to make a good assessment.
I've never seen my daughter sit so still as well that in that psychiatrist's office. I honestly my mind was blown. I was actually anxious about what the outcome was going to be because she sat so still. And this is a child who has to be doing handstands and cartwheels when we're having bedtime stories. She can't even sit
Mhm.
next to me and listen to a story. It's, yeah, it is wild. And that's why one of the reasons why so many women have been missed, because they are so good at masking. And yeah, it's a big challenge. I'm glad that we're talking about it now.
Mm.
It's going to release a lot of pressure on a lot of people that they can take that mask off.
Well, I think you talk about the masking, and I think it can be different between parents as well. Like with one particular parent, a child might feel that they can't mask because one parent might not acknowledge certain things and say, no, let's get on with it. And therefore, the one that is a bit more sympathetic then gets the mask taken off and then has to deal with all the unmasking, which can be stressful as well. And again, going back to that communication thing, is that's a difficult thing to then take, is all the energy coming out, all the emotional dysregulation. And so being patient with that is quite a challenge as well.
I like the spoon theory. Do you know
Hmm.
about the spoon
Yeah.
theory?
Yeah. If
Yeah.
you could explain it for the listeners.
Yeah, so the idea is that you wake up in the morning and you've got a set number of spoons for the day, and different things, different activities, different tolls on your energy. They take a different number of spoons. But it's really helpful to, again, as a tool to be able to get to the end of the day and sit there and have a child cartwheeling across the bed and be able to say, you know what, kiddo, I've run out of spoons today. And I know you really want me to read one more chapter, and I will, but only if you can come and sit down, because I just don't have the spoons to be able to raise my voice and project over there whilst you're cartwheeling. I just want a quiet little snuggle and a story. So it's helpful, I think, to have those kind of ways to be able to talk about energy levels and what you can give and recognizing what you've got left in the drawer.
I mean, I think also particularly in neurodivergent families where there's a parent and a child, I think it's particularly important for the child to understand, because at early age, if they are going through the process of getting diagnosed or trying to understand it, when they are aware that there are challenges that they have, and it's reverberating within the family, they can feel a sense of shame about that and want to figure it out. And the one thing that I look at in my coaching is like, have you ever read The Chimp Paradox by Professor Stephen Peters?
I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, so it's basically as our brains have evolved, we've got like the human evolution of the brain is this really logical part, a really powerful part of the brain. And that takes up a lot of the fuel, the spoons concept. It takes, if you've got 20 spoons, most neurotypical people will be able to fill those each night from a good night's sleep and lots of nice food. But with ADHD, because there's fewer dopamine receptors, it's less. Any, anyway, what kicks in afterwards is the sort of what people might call the reptilian brain, or Stephen Peters calls it the chimp brain, which is going on fight, flight, and freeze reactions, instincts. And so understanding that there's those two parts of our brain, or two pilots navigating at any one time, and it depends who's got the energy to do so, I think it relieves you personally of, I mean, it doesn't make excuses for you. It just says, the reason I did that, and I regret that I did it that way, I wish I could have done it better, is because I hadn't got the energy. I was maybe a bit worried about something, and my chimp took over, fight, flight, or freeze. And so if you can externalize that and use those different sort of personalities to observe the behavior, you don't internalize all of that behavior and therefore struggle with the shame of going, why do I do that? Why don't I understand it? It's like, okay, I can observe, I wanted to do this, but I did that instead. Why did that happen? And then you can remove a bit of that shame, I think, from all the challenges that you're having.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is really helpful to be able to have those conversations and recognize that. And I think it's important for us as parents to be able to share that information with our kids as early as we possibly can, because it's really damaging when a child grows up in life without being able to recognize that and be aware of that, and it's not their fault.
I think perhaps also as well, I mean, we haven't used the term labels much in this conversation, but I think there can be a difference between parents who realize that they are neurodiverse to neurotypical parents dealing with children that might need a diagnosis. I think there's a fear in neurotypical parents of going, oh, then they're going to be labeled with this thing that I don't understand. Whereas if you've got ADHD or autism, and then you're saying, I want them to get diagnosed because if only I'd have been diagnosed earlier, I would have been able to understand it better. And I think there's an understanding of how important it is for someone to navigate through their life, understanding where's the manual for this brain.
Yeah, definitely. And also understanding it, but being able to get whatever it is that they need to support them through the different chapters of their lives, because we need different things at different times. And I mean, I think about when I was at uni, for example, and what would the outcome have been had I at that time knew about my ADHD and had been able to take the medication that I take now.
Mm-hmm.
I think about the relationships that I've had in the past and how I may have navigated those differently had I been more aware of my communication style and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah. And one of the other things that really was important to me when it came to understanding our daughter's traits and why she thought and behaved the way that she did was about actually our son and how I was responding to their behavior and whether it was equal and fair. Because we have to accommodate each other when there is a reason behind our different communication styles and we're not just being difficult. But that's not always easy for an 8, 9, 10-year-old to interpret and understand. So being able to, I don't know, shed some light on that for them as well and give them the tools that they need to be able to navigate this family and this home that they live in with the chaos or the literal conversations or whatever it is that you have at hand.
I think that is a big challenge. I mean, I remember my childhood, it literally, you were looking to your siblings to be like, I mean, I was the youngest, so I was like, well, I want to be allowed to do that when I'm that age because they were, so you're literally comparing everything to how evenly you're being treated. But now we're realizing that people need different things. And so it's really important to communicate those things that people need so that people can understand why you might be treating one child in one way and another child in another. And I think that's the challenge that they're having at schools as well, is that schools are trying to catch up with accommodations, but it's really difficult when we're just understanding what those accommodations could be, and then allowing everybody else to understand that a child might need this and another child might need that, without it affecting everybody else going, well, why can't I do that?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, Lawrence, if you get me onto schools, I'll be going down a complete different rabbit hole. It's an area that I'm really passionate about, and I've got big ambitions for us in the next kind of couple of years to really support the school system, the teachers,
Mm,
the
no,
families that are engaged with it, because there's a lot of great work going on, but I think there's still a lot of things to do.
absolutely. No, I agree totally. I think it'd be wonderful to tackle that, have another conversation about that at a different time. But just to wrap things up, I'm looking at the time and I realize we're running out. You've probably got other calls to do. But just for the listeners, if they're interested in looking to see what Care ADHD can offer, could you just give a little summary of the different services that people can go and investigate and start the journey there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we support children and adults at any point in their journey. So whether you've already had a diagnosis or whether you're yet to be assessed. And we currently support the ADHD pathway as well as the autism pathway. We've got some amazing clinicians who are very experienced in different areas and specialisms. And on, for example, the children's pathway, if you were to leave with a diagnosis of some sort, you can then access our kind of non-pharmacological offering, shall we say. So it's a skills and supports pathway. It allows you to get psychoeducation, support with behavioural interventions. So it's not just about medication. But of course, if you do want to look at medication as an option, whether it's for an adult or for a child, then that's also something that we can do. We do have a prescribing service. And we offer services privately as well as via the NHS. So anyone can go to their GP if they're in England under the Right to Choose framework and ask for a referral to us, and we'll be able to support you on that journey.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining me today and having a wonderful conversation. And like I say, I would definitely love to come have you back on and talk about schools and education and everything else.
I'd love that. I'd love that. Absolutely. And I'll get in a room with the light on next time.
Oh, it looks like you're in a disco. It's fine.
It does at the moment. It's the screen next to me is going off now. So I'm sorry, anyone watching, wondering what on earth's going on. Thank you,
Okay.
Lawrence. It's been lovely. Really
Thank
enjoyed
you, Kat. Take care. Well, there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed that episode and my guest, Kat Frize. And if you are interested in checking out Care ADHD and you're living in the UK and you want to either get an assessment, you want to check out the Right to Choose path, then you can head on over to careadhd.co.uk. And it's a great resource over on that website there. I did promise you I would chat a little bit more about the things that I've been working on. So yeah, if you head on over to adhdcanvas.io, the links are in the show notes. You will find that there's a new website up there it's basically the home of the ADHD Canvas, and it explains exactly what the ADHD Canvas is. It goes into detail on what the UMPAR framework is, which is what the Canvas is built upon. You can get some information on what the book will be about, and you can sign up for the waitlist there. And also, I did also mention that there was the ADHD Entrepreneur Business Automation Blueprint. So you can get your hands on that if you head on over to the website. There is also a free course available, Understanding and Managing Your ADHD. I will be recording some episodes in the coming weeks that goes into a deep dive on each one of those. So what is the ADHD Canvas? Well, it is a visual coaching tool. It really allows you to get your ADHD brain out of your head and onto a canvas so that you can see it and you can begin to recognize the patterns of what is causing some of the challenges that you have with your ADHD. And then not only that, there is a suite of coaching tools that then help you to work through some of those challenges and help you to prioritize which of those challenges you should work on first. And not only that, it is built within a task management system. So not only can you reflect on what those challenges are and how you might be able to start managing them, you can actually use the tool to set reminders for yourself to act upon those and really take action and hopefully start to reduce some of the overwhelm and start managing some of those executive function challenges that you are experiencing. And the same goes for the business automation blueprint. So if you are working for yourself, you run your own business, then you might well be aware that there are a lot of automation tools out there. And there's a lot of people going on about how AI can help reduce the workload and the overwhelm of running your own business. But how do you do that? If you're a bit like me and you get very excited by shiny objects, then you've probably had a go at building some automation tools or using some automation platforms, but you very quickly get overwhelmed. You end up, using these AIs and they just churn out a load of AI slop. So how can you overcome this and begin to start leveraging a lot of those tools? Well, the answer is by using the business automation blueprint. Essentially, it helps you map out your business. You can actually feed in the information from your website, and you will generate an entire business strategy that becomes basically the contextual knowledge docs that you can plug into any automation tool or any AI tool. And that really trains the AI on exactly how your business runs. And it helps you perhaps fill in some gaps, maybe where you haven't quite established all of those frameworks within your business. So I really recommend checking that out if you are feeling like you are the bottleneck in your business and you're currently overwhelmed trying to do the job that you love, but ending up doing all the busy work. So like I say, I've been quite busy and I'm sorry I've been away for so long, but if you keep an eye out for some more episodes coming up in the coming weeks, I'm sure we will have lots of fun. Okay, well, take care and I will see you very soon.